What makes sailors respect a movie about aircraft carriers? Is it the scale, the tension, the sound of engines, or something less obvious? Real crews will tell you it's about systems, pressure, and consequences. Miss that, and the illusion collapses. Get it right, and even decades later, the film still feels true. Some movies understand this instinctively. Others miss it completely. And once you see the difference, you can't unsee it. Let's start with the ones that quietly earned respect the hard way. Number 15. Men of the Fighting Lady. 1954. This is where many sailors start nodding almost immediately. Men of the Fighting Lady is not a drama pretending to be authentic. It is authenticity first, drama second. The film blends documentary footage with a light narrative structure, following carrier-based air crews during Pacific operations. What stands out is how little the movie tries to shape emotion. It simply observes. Launches happen because they must. Recoveries are tense without being exaggerated. The carrier feels like a working environment, not a symbol. Sailors respect how the deck is shown as crowded, loud, and unforgiving. Everyone has a role. No one looks important alone. Movements are tight. Timing matters. Mistakes are quiet but costly. That sense of shared responsibility feels real. There is no heroic framing of individuals. The focus stays on coordination. Crews are tired, focused, efficient. The carrier operates like a living system that never fully rests. Because much of the footage comes from real operations, nothing feels staged. The ocean looks endless. The carrier looks massive and vulnerable at the same time. Men of the Fighting Lady earns respect because it does not explain naval life. It shows it. Sailors recognize that difference instantly. Number 14. Task Force, 1949. Task Force is less about action and more about evolution. It tells the story of how aircraft carriers became central to naval strategy, and it does so without turning the idea into a slogan. Clark Gable plays a career officer pushing against tradition. Battleships dominate thinking. Carriers are still seen as experimental. The tension comes from meetings, arguments, and planning rooms rather than constant movement. Sailors respect this because real change rarely happens during loud moments. It happens during long resistance. What the film gets right is patience. The carrier is treated as a complex system that must earn trust. Failures happen. Setbacks linger. Nothing feels inevitable. When progress comes, it feels earned rather than scripted. There's also an honesty about institutional friction. Innovation is slow. Pride gets in the way. Careers are risked quietly, not heroically. That rings true for anyone who has worked inside a large organization. Even the sea sequences avoid exaggeration. The carrier is massive, deliberate, and dependent on coordination. You never forget how many people are involved. Task Force feels like a movie made by people who understood that respect is built over time. That's why it still lands with sailors today. Number 13. Away All Boats, 1956. At first glance, Away All Boats looks like a standard post-war studio film, but sailors tend to look past the surface and notice something important. This movie understands leadership under strain. The story centers on an officer assigned to an attack transport operating alongside carriers during Pacific operations. What stands out is how decisions feel heavy. Orders are not clean victories. They come with trade-offs, hesitation, and doubt. The carrier groups in the film feel distant yet essential. They are not glorified. They are part of a larger machine. The movie avoids the trap of making aviation the only thing that matters. Instead, it shows how many moving parts must align. There's also an emotional restraint here that sailors recognize. Characters don't announce their fears. They carry them. Authority is questioned internally, not loudly. That tone feels honest. The film benefits from actual naval experience behind the scenes, and it shows in the way scenes are blocked and paced. Nothing feels rushed. Nothing feels random. Away All Boats earns respect because it treats command as a burden, not a reward. Sailors notice that immediately. Number 12, In Harm's Way, 1965. This film often gets remembered for its cast, but sailors pay attention to something else entirely. In Harm's Way understands the weight of failure. The story follows naval officers before and after the attack on Pearl Harbor, with aircraft carriers playing a key strategic role. What sets it apart is how it handles aftermath. Decisions made early echo later. Mistakes are not erased by bravery. The carrier operations feel deliberate. Launches are planned. Movements are cautious. The ocean feels like an environment that demands respect, not a backdrop. The movie also avoids simplifying leadership. Characters argue. Doubt lingers. Pride costs time. That complexity feels familiar to anyone who has lived inside structured command. Even when the film becomes dramatic, it never turns discipline into rebellion. Authority matters. Process matters. The system is always bigger than the individual. Sailors respect In Harm's Way because it doesn't pretend experience makes people perfect. It shows how responsibility changes people over time. Number 11. The Final Countdown, 1980. This one surprises people. On paper, The Final Countdown sounds like pure fantasy. Yet sailors often admit it gets more right than expected. The reason is procedure. The carrier operations aboard the Nimitz are shown with unusual care. Deck routines, chain of command, and communication feel authentic. Even when the premise bends reality, the environment does not. The carrier feels alive, busy, structured. Nothing happens without coordination. The crew behaves like professionals responding to the unexpected, not characters chasing spectacle. What sailors appreciate most is restraint. The film constantly emphasizes limits. Just because something is possible does not mean it is done. That mindset feels real. The movie also avoids turning the carrier into a toy. Scale matters. Time matters. Choices matter. The Final Countdown earns respect not because of its idea, but because of how seriously it treats the people inside the system. Number 10. Sink the Bismarck, 1960. This film earns respect by understanding something basic but often ignored. Naval stories are not about speed. They are about pressure over time. Sink the Bismarck is not centered on a carrier deck the entire time, but carriers exist as part of the wider naval thinking that shapes every decision. What sailors respect is how the movie treats command. Everything happens in rooms filled with maps, estimates, and incomplete information. Orders are debated. Timing is argued. Nothing feels easy. The sea here feels vast and unforgiving. Ships are not fast-moving heroes. They are tools operating inside narrow windows of opportunity. The carrier groups are discussed with care, not excitement. They are assets to be positioned correctly, not unleashed dramatically. The film also understands restraint. When action finally happens, it feels earned because the buildup has weight. You feel the tension of waiting, watching, and calculating. Sailors recognize that rhythm immediately. There is no grandstanding, no speeches designed to pump you up, just people trying to make the least wrong decision possible under pressure. That mindset is why this film still gets quiet respect from naval audiences. Number 9. They Were Expendable, 1945. This is one of those films that does not try to impress you. It simply tells the truth as plainly as possible. Set during the early Pacific fighting, the movie focuses on smaller units, but aircraft carriers hang over everything like distant giants. What sailors appreciate is how carriers are treated as scarce, valuable, and stretched thin. Nothing arrives on time. Support is never guaranteed. The tone is somber without being heavy. Loss is acknowledged without speeches. People keep moving because they have to. That emotional realism is rare. The film avoids exaggeration. There are no miraculous escapes, just steady pressure and long odds. Sailors recognize that feeling of being part of something much larger and much harder than expected. Leadership here is quiet. Orders are given simply. Authority is never questioned loudly, but doubt exists privately. That balance feels honest. They were expendable respects the idea that not every contribution gets remembered. That alone puts it high on many sailors' lists. Number 8. The Bedford Incident, 1965. This film is all about tension that never releases. And sailors respect that because it feels real. The Bedford Incident focuses on a destroyer, but carrier doctrine shapes the mindset throughout. The story examines command obsession, routine escalation, and how structure can become dangerous when flexibility disappears. What sailors notice is how accurately the film shows professional momentum. Once a course is set, it becomes harder to change. Procedures stack on top of each other. Nobody wants to be the person who slows things down. The sea feels cold and endless. The ship feels isolated. Communication is precise, clipped, and emotionally restrained. That tone feels authentic to anyone who has lived inside strict command environments. The movie never turns tension into spectacle. It just keeps tightening. Sailors often say this film understands how pressure builds quietly until it becomes unavoidable. It's uncomfortable. It's controlled. And that's exactly why it earns respect. Number 7. Greyhound, 2020. Greyhound surprised a lot of people. It doesn't focus on aircraft carriers directly, but it treats them with the seriousness sailors expect. The film centers on escort duty, where carriers are distant but essential. The entire mission exists to protect larger assets moving across the ocean. That perspective feels accurate. What stands out is the pacing. There is no downtime for the audience because there is no downtime for the crew. Orders are constant. Calculations repeat. Fatigue builds silently. The film also avoids drama between characters. Everyone behaves like professionals. There are no personal arcs competing with the mission. Sailors recognize that tone immediately. The ocean feels oppressive. Time stretches. Every decision feels narrow and risky. That environment matches reality far more than exaggerated hero moments. Greyhound respects the idea that naval service is about endurance, not glory. That's why it landed so well. Number 6. The Enemy Below, 1957. This film earns its place because it understands respect between professionals. The Enemy Below focuses on surface and underwater warfare, but aircraft carriers exist as part of the strategic background shaping every move. The story is about patience, discipline, and mutual recognition of skill. What sailors appreciate is the lack of caricature. Both sides are shown as trained, thoughtful, and restrained. No one behaves recklessly. Every move has consequence. The pacing is deliberate. Silence matters. Waiting matters. Observation becomes the real action. That mindset aligns closely with real naval experience. Leadership here is calm under pressure. Decisions are made without speeches. Authority is quiet but firm. The Enemy Below respects the intelligence of its audience. It trusts tension instead of noise. Sailors almost always respond positively to that. Number 5. The Hunt for Red October, 1990. This movie earns sailor respect not because it is loud, but because it is precise. While the story focuses on underwater strategy, aircraft carriers sit at the center of the larger naval chessboard. They are treated as strategic anchors, not dramatic toys. Everything moves around them with intention. That mindset feels accurate. What stands out is discipline. Characters speak carefully. Orders are followed without flair. Decisions unfold slowly, shaped by incomplete information. Sailors recognize that rhythm instantly. Real operations are rarely fast. They are deliberate and tense. The film also respects professionalism on all sides. No one is exaggerated. No one behaves recklessly just to push the plot forward. Skill is shown through restraint, not bravado. The ocean feels vast and isolating. Time feels heavy. Silence matters. These are details sailors respond to. The Hunt for Red October understands that naval power is about control, not chaos. That clarity is why it still gets nods of approval decades later. Number 4. Tora, 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 1970. This is one of the most respected naval films ever made, and sailors will tell you exactly why. It refuses to simplify. The story presents events from multiple perspectives without assigning heroes or villains. Aircraft carriers are shown as parts of a system shaped by timing, intelligence, and miscalculation. Nothing feels staged for emotion. What sailors appreciate most is balance. Command decisions feel human. Information arrives late. Confusion lingers. Consequences unfold without commentary. The carrier operations are grounded and methodical. Launches feel procedural. Planning scenes matter just as much as action. That ratio feels right. The film also avoids hindsight judgment. It shows how easily errors happen inside complex systems. Sailors recognize that truth immediately. Tora 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 earns respect because it treats history as process, not spectacle. Number 3. Midway, 1976. This version of Midway still holds weight because it respects the scale of carrier warfare. Unlike later adaptations, this film takes its time. It shows preparation, fatigue, and the sheer coordination required to operate carriers in combat conditions. Nothing feels rushed. Sailors often point out how the film treats carriers as fragile despite their size. Every decision carries risk. Every launch feels like a commitment that cannot be undone easily. The use of real footage and practical effects gives the film texture. It feels physical, imperfect, and grounded. That matters. Command scenes are given space. Leaders debate. Doubt exists. Victory never feels guaranteed. That uncertainty mirrors reality. Midway is respected not because it is flashy, but because it understands the cost of every choice. Number 2. The Bridges at Toko-Ri, 1954. This film understands loss without exploiting it. That alone earns sailor respect. The story follows carrier-based aviation during the Korean conflict, but its real focus is consequence. Missions are not framed as triumphs. They are framed as obligations. Carrier operations feel routine and relentless. Launches happen because they must, not because they are dramatic. Sailors recognize that tone instantly. The movie also avoids glorifying sacrifice. It treats risk as part of the job, not as a spectacle. That restraint feels honest. What stands out most is the emotional quiet. There are no speeches explaining meaning. The weight is allowed to sit with the viewer. The Bridges at Toko-Ri respects the idea that service does not always offer closure. Sailors rarely forget that. Number 1. The Kane Mutiny, 1954. This is the carrier-adjacent naval film sailors argue about the most, and that's why it lands at number 1. The story is not about action. It's about leadership under stress. Authority, doubt, and responsibility are examined without easy answers. Aircraft carriers shape the wider environment, but the focus is psychological pressure. Sailors recognize this immediately. Stress changes people. Structure can crack quietly before it breaks openly. The film never tells you who is right. It lets you decide. That honesty feels rare. Command is shown as fragile, not because leaders are weak, but because the job is heavy. Sailors respond to that truth. The Kane Mutiny earns respect because it understands that the hardest battles often happen inside the chain of command. 3 aircraft carrier movie sailors don't respect. Pearl Harbor, 2001. This film mistakes volume for weight. Everything is loud, fast, and emotional, but very little feels grounded. Aircraft carriers exist mostly as scenery. They are shown but not understood. Operations lack structure. Movements feel decorative rather than purposeful. Sailors often point out how quickly procedure disappears. Decisions happen on instinct instead of planning. Timing feels convenient. Consequences fade as soon as the scene changes. The ocean never feels demanding. It feels staged. Emotion replaces discipline at every turn. Personal drama overwhelms coordination. That breaks immersion fast for anyone familiar with carrier life. Real service depends on systems holding under pressure. When those systems vanish, the story collapses. For sailors, Pearl Harbor feels less like naval life and more like noise dressed in uniforms. Battleship, 2012. This movie treats naval service like a video game with a bigger budget. Ships move without weight. Distance does not matter. Time resets between scenes. Aircraft carriers and surface ships behave like toys instead of massive systems. Orders feel optional. Structure feels cosmetic. Crew coordination barely exists. Sailors immediately notice the lack of limits. In real life, limits define everything. Here, the ocean feels empty and forgiving. The film chases spectacle instead of process. Action replaces logic. Decisions have no lasting effect. Nothing accumulates. Sailors don't expect perfection, but they expect respect for reality. Battleship offers fantasy wrapped in naval imagery. Once that illusion breaks, there is nothing left to hold on to. U-571, 2000. This film loses sailor respect for one reason above all others. It rewrites history. Accuracy matters deeply to naval audiences. When real events are altered for excitement, trust disappears. Sailors notice immediately when timelines shift and roles are reassigned for convenience. Beyond that, the film simplifies operations to the point of distortion. Missions feel rushed. Outcomes feel inevitable. Uncertainty is replaced with certainty, and that never feels honest. Aircraft carriers and wider naval strategy are treated as background ideas instead of structured systems. Everything bends toward drama. Once history is changed, the foundation cracks. Sailors may enjoy tension, but not at the cost of truth. That line matters, and this film crosses it. So what separates respect from rejection? It's not budget, it's not effects. It's whether a movie understands systems, pressure, and consequence. Aircraft carriers are not stages. They are environments shaped by discipline and time. The films that honor that truth still hold up, the ones that don't fade fast. Now it's your turn. Which carrier film got it right for you, and which one lost you instantly? Drop your take and let's keep the debate moving.